From the moment a visitor arrives onto the Toledo Museum of Art's campus, the goal is to ensure an enjoyable and inclusive experience. Since its founding in 1901, the Toledo Museum of Art has earned a global reputation for the quality of its collection and its innovative, extensive education programs. Thanks to the generosity of its founders and the ongoing support of its members, TMA remains a privately endowed, nonprofit institution offering free public access to its collection. More than 30,000 artworks are housed in architecturally significant buildings on a 37-acre campus. The museum's innovative education programs provide a variety of multisensory experiences for every visitor. The team at the Toledo Museum of Art is committed to fulfilling its mission and cultivating an organizational culture where every individual feels valued, inspired, respected, and empowered. To ensure a great experience, the team has collaborated to explore ways of enhancing accessibility, allowing everyone to engage fully with everything the museum has to offer.
So our accessibility initiatives were really launched through partnership, and that has to do with two things. One is bringing in financial support. We have to make sure that we onboard expertise, which has cost implications, and the Ability Center and Joseph, Judith, and Susan Kondo, the Kondo family, provided that in helping us create a position called the Manager of Access Initiatives.
Hi, my name is Katie Shelley, and I am the Kondo family Manager of Access Initiatives at the Toledo Museum of Art.
Welcome to our special feature on TMA's Access Initiatives, where we dive into the story behind the museum's ongoing efforts to make art accessible to everyone. From physical changes in our building to shifts in organizational culture, these initiatives reflect our dedication to inclusivity, equity, and universal design. Through the voices of our staff, partners, and community members, we'll explore the challenges, successes, and future of accessibility at the Toledo Museum of Art. Our journey begins with Patty O'Toole, Chief Financial and Operating Officer of the museum, who discusses how these accessibility efforts were launched and sustained with the help of strategic partnerships.
Without funding, capital projects can't really be implemented. We have been really fortunate to have the Kondo family as a very big supporter for us, and they've been a critical component. From the start, we have taken a very holistic approach to accessibility by combining it with diversity, equity, and inclusion. We also have created Katie's position as Manager of Access Initiatives.
With a solid foundation in place, TMA initiated its first comprehensive accessibility audit, identifying areas of improvement across the museum. Patty highlights how this process helped prioritize projects and transform the way the museum views its spaces, from pathways and entrances to everyday staff operations. The audit wasn't just a box to check, it was a blueprint for meaningful change.
We did an accessibility audit, which allowed us to know what projects to prioritize. I've spent a lot of time with Katie. It's really just seeing the physicality of the museum differently. We need to be thinking about accessibility in our normal daily routine, and it needs to be considered in all decisions that involve staff and guests. We also are encouraging all staff to consider it in all their decisions.
For staff members like Jill Huffbauer in Visitor Services, accessibility is more than just a policy, it's a daily experience. Jill, who is visually impaired, shares her journey of navigating the museum with adaptive technologies and the support of colleagues who help ensure her workplace remains inclusive. Her story sheds light on how small adjustments can make a huge difference in someone's ability to contribute fully to their work.
I am Jill Huffbauer, and I work in Visitor Services as one of the Visitor Services Associates.
I find some of the challenges that I run into, unfortunately, we recently changed the ticketing system that we used, so I'm relying more and more and more on my adaptive programs. I have to find it in the viewfinder. Now this time I'm able to see it. A lot of other people's phones I cannot see. I have good days, I have bad days. The lighting levels change, so some days are much darker. There's not the overhead ambient light flooding the gallery with natural light, even though it's protected. Over there, it's just gallery lighting like it is in there. If there's paperwork that's handed out, it's usually going to be in a standard font that is not something that I'm going to be able to read. And reminding people that PDF formats are not accessible. There are some things like walking down the staff hallway between the dock and going to Herrick Lobby, where there are some lockboxes that are enough closely the same color as the wall that if Carrot isn't really paying close attention, she has walked me into those. Just something as simple as being able to have the bump dots on the microwaves, a larger map to be able to give directions to people, something that I can point out the general area where things are so that I don't have to try to struggle and read it on the map that we hand out.
Jill's experience illustrates how something as simple as adjusting the format of paperwork or improving the lighting levels in a space can make a world of difference for staff and visitors alike. She also advocates for inclusive design in every aspect of her job, from ticketing systems to audio guides, reminding us that accessibility benefits everyone, not just those with recognized disabilities.
Whether you have vision issues or not, we have a lot of requests for audio guides. A lot of people were like, oh my gosh, finally somebody can actually just describe this painting to me. Like, there's a section here, and then there's a section here, and then there's a section here. It doesn't understand that. The app doesn't understand that, so it will sometimes try to read across as one line, so it's like disjointed. Being able to also have tactile items to be able to feel some of the textures, it makes a huge difference.
In addition to internal adjustments, the museum's physical infrastructure has been undergoing significant changes. Tom Huth, Director of Facilities, has been at the forefront of these modifications. From upgrading elevators with Braille to installing new accessible pathways, Tom has seen firsthand how small physical changes can transform the museum experience for both staff and visitors.
My name is Tom Huth. I'm the Director of Facilities. Over the last several years since Katie came on board, I've done a few special projects. The first thing that I did is took money out of her facilities budget and put in 2 door openers. It made every employee on an equal level so you could come through the same entrance. We did a path up to our sculpture walk for people that may have wheelchairs or walkers. We also upgraded our elevators. We put in Braille. And we also have a family restroom where we added an adult changing table. We're trying to give everyone the same 5-star visitor experience to enjoy here at TMA.
For Tom, accessibility is no longer just a task on a checklist. It's a personal mission. His perspective has shifted dramatically since working with the Conda family manager of Access Initiatives, Katie Shelley. Tom now advocates for accessibility in every project, seeing it as essential to providing a 5-star experience for all museum visitors.
In my old buildings that I've managed, I've never thought about automatic doors and handrails. When I got here and realized how far behind we were and how far we have come, I've learned that we really haven't looked at it in other people's eyes. Walk around and take a look at your building and look at simple things like how would someone enter a parking lot with a wheelchair or walker? How would someone enter a restroom if that has a heavy door? I've learned over the years that places and companies have not kept up with the times.
But accessibility is not just about physical modifications. For community advocates like Nathan Turner, who lives with cerebral palsy, accessibility is about creating an inclusive environment where everyone feels welcome. Nathan's connection to the museum runs deep, as it's a place where his family has been involved as volunteers. Nathan grew up with a special appreciation for the museum's role in fostering reflection and community.
I live with cerebral palsy, but it doesn't define who I am. And I've built a career advocating for people living with disabilities in state government. I've grown up in the Toledo area all my life and lived most of my life here. And my family got me involved in visiting the museum early on because they served here as volunteers. And I really quickly learned that the museum is a place of peace and reflection. It belongs to the community. My initial experiences with the museum may have been hampered a good bit by accessibility challenges. I know the elevators were hard to navigate and there were some historical challenges there. And then sometimes too, if the museum is too crowded, it makes it harder for me to enjoy myself.
Nathan reflects on how the museum has evolved, particularly with exhibitions like Expanding Horizons, where tactile busts and paintings at eye level create an immersive experience for those with sensory and visual disabilities. This kind of thoughtful design exemplifies how TMA is not only addressing physical barriers, but is also leading the way in rethinking how people with disabilities experience art.
I really think the museum is demonstrating a commitment to being one of the most accessible museums in the country by not only focusing on just physical access. The Expanding Horizons exhibit, I think, really demonstrates some of the changes in the areas of focus and the emphasis on accessibility that Katie Shelley and the museum have really been putting forward to advance accessibility and equity for visitors. One of the things I really appreciate is that the paintings in the Expanding Horizons exhibit are at eye level, and there are also recreations of busts to allow for a tactile experience. So guests with a variety of visual and sensory disabilities can also experience the works of art.
The impact of these accessibility changes is not limited to the visitors. Caroline Keller, an archival assistant, shares how the introduction of mobility aids has changed her perspective on navigating the museum spaces. For Caroline, the installation of accessibility buttons has made a significant difference in her ability to work independently.
My name is Caroline Keller. I am an archival assistant at the Toledo Museum of Art. Going from not using a mobility aid to using a mobility aid changed my perspective on navigating the museum and particularly opening doors. The accessibility buttons at the staff entrance made a huge difference for me. Then when I started working in the archives, the door is really old and heavy. So Julie worked with Tom in facilities to install a accessible button, and that made my life so much easier.
Caroline's story highlights the importance of simple but effective changes that allow staff to feel empowered and independent in their roles. Her participation in the museum's accessibility subcommittee has also given her a platform to advocate for others, ensuring that all voices are heard when decisions about accessibility are made.
Early on in my visitor services career, I was working the front desk at Herrick Lobby with Katie. It was freezing cold and the fire alarm went off. Both Katie and I had to exit the museum through the staff entrance, and those double doors didn't have an accessible button at the time. And they're very heavy magnetic doors, so I had to shove those open so she could get through, and we start making our way down towards the parking lot. And by the time that she and I make it out the door and all the way down towards the parking lot, they're already calling people back in. Having an entire person, an entire department dedicated to making sure that everything is accessible for people with all sorts of disabilities, I think it's not something that we talked about very early in my career here. Being a part of the accessibility subcommittee and having a voice is really important to me.
For Brian Brown, a protective services associate, the journey toward inclusion extends beyond physical accessibility. Brian, who is neurodivergent, speaks to the importance of creating a work environment where everyone feels valued, regardless of how they process social interactions. His experience underscores the need for emotional and social inclusivity alongside physical accessibility.
My name is Brian Brown, and I'm a Protective Services Associate and Staff Entrance Officer at Toledo Museum of Art. My biggest hurdle is the social aspect. For the most part, in my day-to-day life here, connecting and interacting with the visitors, it's mostly surface level. I suppose I would behave as what I would see as neurotypical people would behave, and I try and get through that interaction. I would say the importance of that inclusivity, it would help someone like me feel less like a burden, and maybe help us internalize that, people really do care.
Brian's reflections remind us that accessibility goes beyond ramps and door openers. True inclusivity considers the diverse ways people experience the world, and it seeks to create an environment where every individual can thrive. As TMA continues to build a culture of belonging, these stories help shape the museum's vision for the future. Next, we hear from the Edward Drummond and Florence Scott Liddy President, Director, and CEO, Dr. Adam Lavine, whose leadership has played a pivotal role in shaping the Toledo Museum of Art accessibility journey. He emphasizes the importance of sustainable funding and expertise to ensure accessibility is deeply integrated into the museum's operations, not as an afterthought, but as a core value.
So our accessibility initiatives were really launched through partnership. Relying on volunteer effort alone is not sufficient. We have to make sure that we onboard expertise, which has cost implications. So finding financial partners to provide the risk capital to get our proof of concept off the ground was absolutely essential. And the Ability Center and the Joseph, Judith, and Susan Conda, the Conda family, provided that in helping us create a position called the Manager of Access Initiatives. But I think it's also really important to note that in both those cases, the Ability Center and the Condas, we also received substantial expertise from both.
Adam highlights a key turning point in TMA's journey, the creation of the Manager of Access Initiatives role, a position initially envisioned as a 3-year joint appointment. However, the immediate impact of this position was undeniable, leading to an endowment by the Conda family. This made TMA the first American art museum to establish a fully endowed position dedicated to accessibility, ensuring this work would continue in perpetuity.
When you're starting a new initiative, it's important to know what you don't know. And everything that we're doing at the museum, we understand that we have expertise to bring to the table, but we also understand there's a limit to that expertise. In any type of new initiative or community engagement, it's important to hear other voices. And the Condas, who are dedicated philanthropists, whose mission is to help people navigate through their lives and take access as a huge focus of their philanthropy, were really important in helping us think through program structure, what's out there, helping us benchmark and connect to other people. And the Ability Center, obviously, as an advocacy organization that also provides incredible services, really accelerated our learning curve. The Manager of Access Initiatives role was conceived of originally as a 3-year position that was a joint appointment with the Ability Center of Greater Toledo. We then had the opportunity and the good fortune to ask and receive an incredibly generous endowment from the Conda family to create the first named position dedicated to accessibility in the American Art Museum, the Conda family Manager of Access Initiative. So that position is now fully endowed with a $2 million gift, and we will have someone dedicated to access on our team in perpetuity.
What makes this story particularly inspiring is how quickly the staff embraced accessibility as a fundamental part of their work. Adam reflects on how the museum's culture shifted almost overnight, with departments across the organization integrating accessibility into their planning with minimal resistance. This seamless adoption speaks not only to the leadership of the Conda family Manager of Access Initiatives, but also to the staff's openness to change and their dedication to providing a more inclusive experience for all.
There were hypotheses that we had when we created the Manager of Access Initiatives position that have proven to be true, namely that by bringing expertise in-house would have really pervasive effects on culture. One of the things that I didn't realize is how quickly the organization would mold itself around that. the way that the entire organization imbibed accessibility as a fundamental criterion of anything that we do was incredible. I think every single department from day one saw the value add of putting accessibility in the planning process. So what surprised me is there was no change management required. So the fact that we introduced such a substantial change and it was seamlessly integrated, it says a lot about the person in that role, Katie Shelley, to be sure, but I think it also says a lot about the receptivity of our staff to begin with. That's part of the reason that I'm so proud to work here.
As Adam explains, accessibility is not just about physical changes to the building. It's a cultural and emotional commitment to ensuring that every visitor feels welcome and included. By embedding accessibility into TMA's 20-year capital plan, the museum has committed to making these improvements part of its long-term vision. Whether it's installing Braille signage, upgrading elevator infrastructure, or rethinking the way exhibits are designed, TMA is setting the stage for a more inclusive future.
Those types of things, those core infrastructure investments just make for a better experience for visitors and make for a better experience for staff. And while if you didn't have 10 years of history or 100 years of history with the Toledo Museum of Art, you might show up and just take things like that for granted. Those are expensive, serious investments that have now been sequenced into our 20-year capital plan. But I think there's also this emotional component, which is the commitment that we have to accessibility and seeing these physical manifestations of it then cause people to not just care about accessibility in their day-to-day job, but feel proud of the work that we're doing around accessibility, which gets this positive flywheel going, right? So the more people hear accessibility introduced into planning internally, the more outputs people see of that planning process, the more proud and positive they feel about accessibility, which translates across the staff, including our frontline staff, and then translates to visitors as well. So I think there's a sense, not just within our internal community of the staff, but also increasingly in the community that we serve in Northwest Ohio, that the museum takes accessibility really seriously, that accessibility as a design criteria sort of permeates what the museum is doing. So there are internal components to that, cultural components to that, but there are also these external reminders as we continue to make upgrades that benefit everybody.
The success of TMA's access initiatives wouldn't be possible without the vision of our CEO, the Conda family, the Ability Center, and the dedication of Katie Shelley, the Conda family manager of access initiatives. As someone who has navigated the world with a disability, Katie brings a unique perspective and passion to her role, advocating for changes that make the museum more inclusive, not only for visitors, but also for her colleagues.
I have been a person with a disability my entire life, but I never thought that I could use my disability as something that would help propel me forward in my career, or had ever thought about accessibility as something that could be pursued as a career.
Katie's journey into accessibility work began with her own experiences navigating challenging spaces, including historic buildings like TMA. She recounts how her perspective shifted when she recognized that her lived experience could shape a career dedicated to inclusivity. Her academic background in disability studies led her to investigate how institutions can balance historical preservation with the need to be universally accessible.
Back in 2014, I started a position here at the Toledo Museum of Art in visitor services. And what I started to notice is that, especially for staff members, there were areas of the museum that really just weren't accessible to me as a person with a disability for me to open doors and get to where I needed to go if the doors weren't automatic. And I started thinking, how can historic buildings like the Toledo Museum of Art become more accessible for people with disabilities and still remain historically significant buildings? While I was working at the Toledo Museum of Art, I had heard about the University of Toledo's Disability Studies program and was encouraged to apply. They had a master's program where you could get your master's in liberal studies with a focus on disability studies. And I researched for my master's thesis how historic buildings can still be historically significant buildings while still also making sure that they are not only compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act, but being as inclusive and accessible to people with disabilities as possible.
Since joining TMA, Katie has implemented numerous accessibility projects with the help of the facilities team, such as installing adult changing tables and enhancing restrooms and elevator accessibility. Through close collaboration with leadership, she has also embedded accessibility projects into the museum's 20-year plan, ensuring that the future upgrades will continually improve access for all. For Katie, accessibility isn't a fixed goal, it's an ongoing process, driven by the desire to make the Toledo Museum of Art a model of inclusivity.
I hear from other people the progress that they've seen. We've been able to make our restrooms more accessible. We have a new adult changing table, but I'm always thinking about what more can I do? How can I make sure that everyone feels included and everyone feels like the Toledo Museum of Art is accessible to them? And so I think for me, it's never going to be enough. And I kind of have to tone down my expectations and remind myself that we're all on this journey together and that people are seeing the changes.
One of the ways Katie's work has come to life is through exhibitions like Expanding Horizons, where accessibility takes center stage. Adero Kaufman-Okoko, an instrumental museum employee, has helped bring this vision to life by developing interpretive strategies that allow visitors of all abilities to experience art in meaningful ways. Adero's work on Expanding Horizons introduces tactile reproductions and audio descriptions, allowing visitors who are blind or people with low vision to engage with art on a new level.
My name is Adero Kaufman-Okoko, and I am the Key Bank Museum Fellow at TMA. I've always been really interested in accessibility. I minored in it when I was in undergrad, so I think it really informed the way that I think about the visitor experience. The whole installation is about examining what is American art and the American identity. It's an experimental exhibit that is really pushing forward inclusive storytelling. In terms of accessibility, we've piloted a lot of new accessible content from tactile reproductions. It's really the first concerted effort of implementing audio description in the galleries. It's really pushing forward a lot of our accessibility goals and initiatives.
Adero shares feedback from visitors who felt deeply moved by the museum's commitment to inclusivity, including one guest who connected with their heritage in a powerful, healing way.
We have a lot of channels for visitors to give feedback, and so we get thousands of comments. Can I read some? Someone said, "It sparks personal interest to continue to discover our America." One of my favorites that we received was someone said, "My grandfather was indigenous to Mexico, and I don't speak Spanish or know much about my heritage because of survival acts of assimilation. This healed a part of my soul today. Thank you." Isn't that like so sweet? You know, a lot of comments like that.
This approach has set a precedent for future exhibitions, demonstrating that accessibility not only removes barriers, but enriches everyone's experience with art. The Toledo Museum of Art's access initiatives are a testament to the power of intentional design and community-driven change. From partnerships with organizations like the Ability Center to the everyday effort of staff members, TMA is working to ensure that art and culture are accessible to all. These stories remind us that accessibility is not a one-time fix, but an ongoing commitment to equity and inclusion for everyone who enters our doors. Thank you for joining us as we explore the journey of TMA's access initiatives. Together, we can continue to build a more inclusive and accessible future for all.